Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You saw the title, you know what it's about. Here we go. We're just gonna dive straight into it.
So Jake the Viking has been one of the most vocal Mr. Beast haters as of late, and hey, I think Mr. Beast deserves a lot of hate right now. Unfortunately though, for Jake, he's also literally a low IQ individual who is a major hypocrite, and I don't really care about his opinion. And I'm gonna explain today why, so be sure to listen to what I have to say, and then if you disagree, let me know. So Jake was actually an employee of the Mr. Beast Industrial Complex years ago. In 2020, he posted a video saying he had no bad blood with any of them, but he wanted to leave regardless to, you know, have less restrictions on his time. And that video actually got 18 million views, so it was a big hit.
There's no hard feelings anywhere, and the fact that I was able to be a part of one of the best YouTube channels in the world, you know, and learn from one of the best and be a part of the best, you know, and kind of put that on my resume and kind of check it off is amazing. Sorry, I'm picking my nose. I don't really care. But now it's, you know, now it's time. I want to move on. I want to, you know, I want to start my own brand. I want to start my own thing. I want to do my own thing.
And hey, that's completely fair in my opinion. You know, you don't have to hate the guys that you worked with. And what's also fair is that later on, you know, he began criticizing Mr. Beast a lot, maybe when he found out new information about Jimmy and what was going on behind the scenes. And, you know, maybe before he felt like he couldn't speak out because it just wasn't the right time. He would be seen as, you know, a liar, and he would discredit allegations. But hey, later on, he decided to, you know, really criticize Mr. Beast very vocally on Twitter. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you know? It's good to have someone who was a former employee, especially talking about some of the misdeeds going on at the Beast Industrial Complex, because it adds credibility to that kind of situation. That's good. But as of Dogpack's latest video, things are changing a little bit. So in my last video, we covered some of the new stuff by Dogpack 404 in his second video titled Mr. Beast is a Sociopath. In the last 5 minutes, he alleges that Mr. Beast knowingly kept a registered child enjoyer on his payroll, a guy called Delaware, supposedly named after the crime he committed in the state he committed it.
But when I was there, they called him Delaware. He's like, why do you call him Delaware? And I didn't know. Apparently, they called him Delaware because he's not allowed to go back to Delaware. That's his nickname? Colloquially? Like, you know, yeah, it's Delaware. Don't ask him why, you know? The f***. And Jimmy knew about it? The likelihood that he didn't know is astronomically low. I'm hungry.
And in that video, I also went over how it was quickly discovered that Jake the Viking was the brother-in-law of this person. Well, now, Jake the Viking has posted a response, and I'd say he made himself look about as bad as he possibly could, given everything. But before we get into that, let's get into a little bit of history for a little bit of a reminder for you guys. So going back to Delaware, he was featured in videos, one of which had 100 million views, where he was wearing a mask. So who is this guy, people ask? Who is this guy, right? Well, as we saw last time, it didn't take long for people to start doing some digging. Now here we have this tweet from 2018 when someone asks, so I'm watching Mr. Beast and they keep calling Jake the Viking Delaware. Since I'm from Delaware, I'm curious why you guys call him Delaware. Now the confusion here is because Jake the Viking and Delaware have a similar appearance. They're both bearded, large men, you would probably say. And Jake makes sure to clarify here. He says they're calling my brother-in-law / manager Delaware, and because that's his name. So here we found out that back in 2018, this tweet was made, and that yes, indeed, Delaware is Jake the Viking's brother-in-law. There's no doubt about that. Now at one point, actually, after this, but before Chris Tyson and all this stuff was exposed, right? Jake had actually been called out on Twitter for this. So we just hadn't noticed, but this was sitting out in the open for a long time. Nobody just put the pieces together. And the reason why it was brought to light is because back when he and Chris Tyson had drama, Chris had called him out. And in this screenshot provided by Chris Tyson, we can see the exact same charge being listed here as the Delaware guy that was in Dogpack's video. So I mean, there's no doubt this is the same person. Now, keep in mind, this argument between Chris Tyson and Jake the Viking, like I said, was from June, before Chris was even exposed, before Dogpack's videos about Mr. Beast. And what makes this even funnier is that Jake talked about this on Twitter in early July. Here, when arguing with someone, he says, figured you'd have a shitty response. You're shallower than I imagined. What would the actions of my brother-in-law, with an instance that happened before I even knew him, have to do with me? Take some time to think of a good response. So someone here then replies saying, dog, your sister married a child enthusiast, and Jake once again says, what does it have to do with me? Well, as it turns out, what it had to do with him was that he directly worked with a guy at the same company. As he said, Delaware is apparently his manager, so he has employed him at some point in time. He pays him to help him out with stuff. We know now that Jake knew about all of this, and he did nothing. In fact, he was fine having him around and employing him. Well, saying he did nothing isn't exactly true. No, instead now he's defending him on Twitter, saying that he's a good guy. because maybe there was some plausible deniability if he had like found out like today about this or something, but that's not even true. Like he had known about this for a while. He has tweeted about this before the Chris Tyson stuff even came out. So when this dog pack video came out and people put this together, Jake started getting a lot of shit for this, and he ended up making a response on the 8th of August of 2024. Here's what he said. He said, "Here's the truth. Yes, Delaware is my brother-in-law. Yes, he is an RSO. When he was 21, a 16-year-old girl accused him and others of SA when she was 11. Delaware took a plea deal. That's why there was no jail time, but he still had to register. His name isn't Delaware because he can't go back to Delaware. He's from Delaware. That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He's been back several times." Okay, so now we know, at least, you know, according to him, his name was Delaware, not because he couldn't go back to that state. He wasn't banned from the state or something. That's just the nickname they gave him. But let's see what he says next. He says, "He was hired before I was and was actually the reason I got hired at Mr. Beast. Before being hired, Delaware sat down with Jimmy and Sue, parentheses, Jimmy's mom, and explained to them everything. So yes, Jimmy knew, but again, this incident happened in 2010. Delaware was hired in 2017 and 18. Delaware was also let go from the company before I was." So Jimmy knew, Jake knew, but the problem is that Jimmy knew. The problem isn't that Jake knew for some reason. I'm having a hard time understanding here. Like, so Jimmy knows, and that's bad, but Jake knows, and that's whatever. You know, what's he supposed to do about that? He goes on to say, "Delaware's charges are set to be dropped this fall. Delaware's a nothing but a good person, an amazing husband to my sister, and the best father to my 2 nieces that I could ever ask for. They want no part in this. I just want to live their lives away from the limelight. I understand why anyone will be upset and frustrated over these allegations, and I do not blame them. Hurting kids in any way is completely unacceptable. But in the case of Delaware, I firmly believe he did nothing wrong and look forward to the day these charges are dropped. Thank you." This is completely insane, and I cannot believe he thought this was a good response. First of all, if what he's saying is true and Jimmy knew about Delaware's charges and kept him around anyway, him, obviously, because that's horrible, right? Like, Mr. Beast. Secondly, Jake also knew, and he admitted it right here, and not only that, he tries to explain and justify this guy's actions to show that he's actually a good dude or something. And he specifically admits to doing what he could, and at no point does he ever say, "Oh, well, you know, I raised a concern to Jimmy, and, you know, I told him about it, and Jimmy didn't care." Like, at no point does he say he criticized this guy. Instead, he's like, he's a great father. And it's like, well, maybe he is a great father now, but when he was 16 years old, apparently he did something disgusting with an 11-year-old. So do I really give a like, there's no excuse for that. What would you call someone that's 16 and does something with an 11-year-old? I know what I would call them. It's not something nice. He says Delaware was 16 when he was charged. And you know what? Maybe if the minor involved was like 14, 16 and 14, I would say fair enough, you know, normal high school relationship. But first of all, he wasn't charged for that, and he wouldn't be because that is normal. He was charged for an action when he was 16 and the girl was 11. So am I supposed to give a about this guy or think he's a good dude? How am I supposed to defend this guy? How can you defend this guy? You cannot defend that person. And moreover, they shouldn't be in a Mr. Beast video. And if Jake knew, honestly, he should have done everything in his power to prevent that guy from being in Mr. Beast videos, regardless of if he got him hired or not. Now, we don't have the court documents. We don't know what specifically the circumstances were behind the situation, but the fact remains that this guy, Delaware, took a plea deal in a case and was formally charged, and I have no reason to defend him. Why did he take a plea deal is the next question. Is it because the evidence presented would make him look bad and he could face serious jail time, so he decided to plead down to a lesser charge? I mean, I just don't see a reason to defend this dude, honestly. I don't. He's literally convicted in a criminal court. What more dead to rights do you need? Now, you may be asking, why am I picking on Jake the Viking? Why do I even care about this guy? If you haven't been on Twitter seeing this stuff go down or watching videos outside of Dogpack's video, then you may not care as much about this. But the reason I care is because Jake has been a very vocal Mr. Beast hater. And once again, that's fair. But I think it's very clear to me now that his hate on these tweets, some of which got tens of thousands, even 100,000 likes, his hate from that was ultimately completely hypocritical, dumb, and he was never in a position to even criticize Mr. Beast at all. I mean, Jake was consistently criticizing Mr. Beast for the exact same thing in regards to Chris Tyson, to farm likes on Twitter, without adding any definitive evidence or anything corroborating the, you know, claims about the situation. He's just like, Jimmy knew. Here he says, Jimmy knew. No accountability. None. The silence is deafening. It just keeps getting worse. Wow, it sounds like Jimmy's a pretty bad dude. I mean, Chris Tyson shouldn't have been on the team, right? Like, undoubtedly, there's no defending that. Like, Chris needed to be off way earlier, right? And then yesterday you get, yes, Delaware is my brother-in-law. Yes, he's a child enjoyer, convicted in a court of law, by the way, by a, you know, court, jury of his peers. You know, legal process happened. And ultimately, his defense is like, well, he's a good guy, he's a good father, and I don't personally believe it. It's like, well, I don't give a what you personally believe. You have a personal bias. The guy went to court. He went to court! And he pled guilty to the crime. When he moves to a new neighborhood, he has to walk around and let everyone know in the neighborhood about what he did. Jake the Viking has been standing on such a high horse about this, when Chris Tyson, as disgusting as he is, has never been formally charged with a crime. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't be charged with a crime. He should be, but you know, Chris hasn't been charged with a crime. Meanwhile, Jake's own brother-in-law, the guy who got him hired, is a criminal, has a charge, and Jake refuses to call him out or condemn him. So the point I'm making here is not that Jake was not put in an awkward spot or something like that, or I could have sympathy with someone in this position in some way, okay? It's that he's been virtue signaling for Twitter likes as if he cares about any of this, when in reality, his own brother-in-law is a criminal who worked at the Mr. Beast company, and he did nothing to stop it and didn't give a shit, and even employed him as his personal manager. There are a ton of legitimate criticisms to make of Mr. Beast and Chris Tyson. There's so much to talk about there. And at this point, it seems very, 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 very unlikely that Jimmy did not know about Delaware. But we have definitive proof that Jake the Viking knew 1000%, and he's frankly not the one to be criticizing anyone for almost anything right now. Jake showed himself to be a clout farming opportunist who really is frankly no better than anything he accused Mr. Beast of doing as of right now. Now, Jake actually responded to me on Twitter when I basically called him out for this, and he said, "So just because I know someone who did something bad and was convicted means I can't call out others for doing bad? That's a wild take, Tom." But this tweet in and of itself is a lie. You didn't just know this guy. You didn't just interact with him. You didn't have like one Discord call with him. He's your brother-in-law. He was working at the same company as you. You claim he's your manager at one point, which means that you were employing him. You know he's around kids right now and don't seem to have a problem with that because he's raising multiple children, okay? That's not a good sign, to be honest with you. And on top of that, you didn't cut him off. You didn't avoid contact or something like that. Instead, when it came out on Twitter, instead of condemning him, you actively choose to defend him publicly. I mean, let's look at his statement one more time just so everybody can be reminded of what he said about this Delaware guy, okay? And keep in mind the charges that this guy was convicted of in a court. Delaware was supposed to be a behind-the-scenes manager, but in a couple videos, he was asked to partake because we needed people. He was reluctant, especially in the straitjacket video because of his charges, and that's why he wore the mask. Delaware's charges are set to be dropped this fall. Delaware's are nothing but a good person, an amazing husband to my sister, and the best father to my two nieces that I could ever ask for. They want no part in this and just want to live their lives away from the limelight. I understand why anyone would be upset and frustrated over these allegations, and I don't blame them. Hurting kids in any way is completely unacceptable. But in the case of Delaware, I firmly believe he did nothing wrong and look forward to the day these charges are dropped. What reason do you have to believe he did nothing wrong? Because he told you? Yeah, he probably would tell you that. He's the one who was charged and ultimately convicted of the crime. And not only that, you say you knew about all of it and you did nothing about it. You did not care. He was hired before I was and was actually the reason I got hired at Mr. Beast. Before being hired, Delaware sat down with Jimmy and Sue, Jimmy's mom, and explained to them everything. So yes, Jimmy knew. Which also means that Jake knew, he had knowledge of all of this, and didn't give a shit. And then you have people on Twitter trying to like mince words and justify Jake's actions here as if he's somehow not a bad dude or not a hypocrite. One, the guy was also a minor when the crime was said to have occurred. What do you mean said to have occurred? He pled guilty. Like, legally it occurred. Doesn't justify his actions, but leaving out context is shitty. Okay, whatever. Two, what is there for Jake to say? His brother-in-law was convicted of a crime. Tyson was actively engaging with minors with no accountability. Mr. Beast is the one who chose to hire him. Jake didn't have any control over that. Well, he didn't have any direct control, maybe, but he also didn't really raise any concerns, did he? Not only that, he never raised this as a point against Mr. Beast. Why? Because he was protecting his brother-in-law from consequences from online scrutiny. When in reality, he had full knowledge behind the scenes of not just someone like Chris Tyson, but somebody who was actually convicted of a crime and was working there, and he didn't say anything about it. So, doesn't look good, does it? 3, Jake getting accused of clout chasing by anyone is rich, considering how many videos you and others have with no firsthand knowledge are running around making. To be clear, you can make videos about this stuff, okay? There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to make videos about what's going on in quote-unquote clout chase. The problem is that Jake is not in a position to clout chase because he's calling out someone for something that he himself is guilty of. So honestly, I do not care about Jake the Viking's opinion whatsoever anymore. Clout chasing is the least of it. It's disingenuous virtue signaling. He never brought any new information to light. He never provided any great explanation for anything. He just makes these vague statements like, Jimmy knew. Well, thank you for your input, Jake. You really added a lot to the conversation. Now, let's talk about what you knew. Jake knew. Hashtag Jake knew. Sounds like you got mad at Jake and want to get back at him. Who was even mad at Jake before this? I mean, he clearly was like being a little bit, you know, cringy on Twitter with the vague statements, but that's like kind of nothing in comparison to what we have here. I didn't even know who Jake the Viking was prior to this situation. I have no beef over this bearded individual, okay, this Viking wannabe guy. I don't give a shit. But he clearly is like such an idiot here. There's no defending him. And the thing is, the fact that, you know, as this guy says, the guy was a minor when it happened, that doesn't really matter to me, okay, because the charge is for someone who is 1 to 11 years old. Jake himself said that she was 11. I wouldn't want to be around anyone who, when they were 16, did anything with an 11-year-old. I'm not gonna like forgive that person. A 16-year-old is a junior in high school in the United States, maybe a sophomore at the youngest. Someone who is 11 years old is in 6th grade, maybe in 5th grade at the youngest. These are completely worlds apart, and it is disgusting that somebody who was 16 years old did anything with someone who was 11 years old, and I hate that guy, frankly. I don't want to defend that guy. You shouldn't want to defend that guy, and he shouldn't be employed at a company that markets products primarily to children. This is a liability in 500 different ways, and Mr. Beast should absolutely be criticized for that, but you know who else can be criticized? Jake the Viking, who did nothing and was fully supportive of this guy working there and didn't give a shit. And this guy, Epic Mike, then says, Tyson was on a Discord server sharing nudes with 12-year-olds, and this is the thing you get most offended about. I don't want to defend Chris here, but that doesn't even seem to be true. Like, there's never been definitive evidence that Chris sent nudes to a kid. They sent graphic artwork to a kid, and that is bad enough. In my opinion, that's just as bad. That doesn't make it any better, but this guy just complained about things being left out or taken out of context, and then he made a claim about something that never even happened. Like, this is such brain rot, and I assume this guy is like a fan of Jake or his friend. I don't really know, but this is like a level of sweeping I cannot fathom for someone who is clearly virtue signaling and spineless over this issue. Now, Nathan, one of the victims from Chris Tyson's Discord server, also spoke out in defense of Jake, so let's see what he had to say. I'm going to try to avoid shitting on Nathan here because he was an actual victim of Chris in this situation, so give him a little bit more leeway here, but I do think this kind of defense is pretty wrong, so I want to explain why. So here he says, so we're canceling Jake the Viking for not disclosing that the guy his sister married is an RSO, but at Mr. Beast knew he was and hired him. Not only did he hire him, but he made him the manager. I think we're focusing on the wrong thing here. How is Jake to blame for his brother-in-law's actions? Well, nobody said that he's to blame for his brother-in-law's actions, but he's to blame for his own actions, and his own actions in this situation are very dumb and irresponsible. How is it his responsibility whatsoever to ever inform anyone of what happened when his brother-in-law has already gone through the justice system? What? What are you? I'm sorry, Nathan, what are you talking about? If somebody has already gone through the justice system and they were convicted of a kid, they got formally charged, and then you have them in YouTube videos that a bunch of kids can see, and you have them over to your house, what responsibility do you have to inform people of that? I don't know. Maybe they're a risk to other minors, and that should be talked about. Maybe that's the responsibility, actually. Like, you would not ever give this same charitability to Mr. Beast, by the way. You would not. And you can say, oh, well, he's the one who hired him. Okay, but Jake worked directly with him, knew what he had done specifically, didn't really seem to give a shit about it, and apparently he's okay with that guy being around kids right now. So, what are you talking about? At the end of the day, Jake did nothing wrong, and I stand by that. He's not a hypocrite for staying silent about his brother-in-law whilst calling for the conviction of Chris. No, he is a hypocrite. His brother-in-law has been through the legal process already. Okay, so just because somebody goes through the legal process, if they go through the legal process for murder, is that still not a bad thing? If somebody goes through the legal process for being a file, is that still not a bad thing? Are we supposed to just not care? Oh, you know, he went through the legal process. He's a good guy now, whatever. No. No. You know who hasn't and also has a mountain of evidence against them? Chris. Yeah, and everybody wants Chris to go to jail. The only one who has truly done wrong who isn't directly involved is Keemstar. He's accusing Jake of chasing clout while simultaneously profiting huge off of victims as he always has. But there's nothing wrong with that. He literally flexed that he got 1 billion views and thanked Chris Tyson when he should be thanking the victims. Disgusting behavior. He's clearly trying to take heat off of Mr. Beast and redirect the attention to Jake. I'm sorry, but this is just dumb. No one's trying to take the heat off of Mr. Beast, and even if they wanted to, they frankly couldn't do that because there's videos with tens of millions of views talking about Mr. Beast and all the allegations against him. Keemstar himself could directly be making thousands of dollars a day, if not more, criticizing Mr. Beast. He is Keemstar. He's the drama alert guy. He's going to ride this wave for as long as he can, and, you know, I don't necessarily blame him. But you can also call out Jake, especially when he's the one who got this attention on himself in the first place. Like, Jake's been the guy who every single update has been Jimmy knew. It's disgusting. How could you ever do something like that? How could you ever employ someone or be around someone like that? It's disgusting. And like now, he's in the same boat. He really is. He brought this on himself. I'm sorry, he did. And it's not like he just knew him. He's defending him and saying he's a good guy. Jake has been virtue signaling, farming likes on Twitter, trying to get as much clout as possible off of saying basically nothing. And, you know, I don't really care if his brother-in-law already went through the legal system. He's still a piece of shit. And I think Chris Tyson, regardless of if a court finds any wrongdoing, is still a piece of shit. These are both very bad people, and they both deserve to be criticized. If Chris Tyson goes to court and they say nothing illegal happened in that court of law, am I supposed to expect that Nathan and everyone else will just not care anymore? Are we going to be like, oh, well, the court said it's fine, so actually we're not victims anymore? No, you would never say that, because obviously, regardless of what the law says, sometimes somebody is a horrible person. Here, Nathan says, actually, I said Jake the Viking did nothing wrong for staying silent about his brother-in-law who already went through the legal system. Never did I say that I support the abuse of anyone as long as they serve their time, because that couldn't be farther from the truth. Jake was not a part of the hiring process of Mr. Beast. He isn't the RSO. That's not on him. Well, maybe Jake wasn't a part of the hiring process, but he did, you know, get in the company as a result of this guy who he previously knew had this charge because it was his, you know, brother-in-law. And don't you think that if you were working at a company like Mr. Beast, which, you know, creates content for millions of children, and you knew that a guy at that company had a rap sheet involving a child, don't you think you would have wanted to say something? Wouldn't you expect that a good, you know, upstanding individual would say something about that and raise a problem with that kind of person, not only because of the brand risk they pose to the entire channel and everyone working there, but also because it's immoral to have somebody who has been convicted of a sex offense making videos that children watch? Don't you think that probably should have been brought up at some point? Did Jake ever do that? Frankly, I don't think so, because if he had, he probably would have said that in his first response to make himself look better. Instead, what he did is he defended his character and said he was a good guy. That's what he did in regards to this convicted sex offender. That's what Jake the Viking did. Make no mistake, Mr. Beast is the greater evil here because of his position, and he deserves to be criticized. But Jake has been farming all of this for clout. He deserves every bit of criticism coming his way right now, and I don't feel bad for him whatsoever. And frankly, as of now, I don't trust him to be a reliable narrator about, like, any of this, because he's already shown himself to be a complete hypocrite who is opportunistically going after someone for something that he himself is, maybe to a slightly lesser degree, also guilty of. I mean, we haven't seen Mr. Beast coming out publicly and defending Chris Tyson for the Discord logs or anything like that. Who have we seen defending someone for, I don't know, being convicted of a crime with a child? Oh, his name is Jake the Viking. Can't forget that. Now, I've been reacting to all of the Mr. Beast videos on the Tom Dark Live channel. There are clips of that if you want to see it. I encourage you to all go watch the Tom Dark Live channel. But if you don't want to see my reactions, then I would highly recommend just going to Dogpack 404's videos about this stuff if you haven't seen it already and don't care for my reaction and you just want to get caught up to speed. I am currently starting work on a main channel video about all the Dogpack stuff, so you can expect that within a few weeks. But obviously there's a lot going on, and those videos are very, like, writing intensive, and they're a lot longer. So you know, as I sort through stuff, I'm going to be able to decide kind of as I get through these videos what's important to include, what's not important to include, and that'll be out within a few weeks. But yeah, you can look forward to that. You know, maybe Mr. Beast will have responded by then and we'll have even more content to go over, but I have a feeling that whatever his response may be, if he mentions Jake the Viking, it's not going to make Jake look very good. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.